your mind, every word a step forward. Let the learning begin. Let the learning begin. Boost your English. Boost your English. B-Y-E. B-Y-E. Welcome to the workshop.
BYE Workshop, Episode 7. Welcome to the 7th session of the BYE Workshop. I am Ryan. If you are looking for comfort or entertainment, you are in the wrong place. This is not a conversation. It is a clinical extraction of linguistic data. We are here to dismantle the English language and replace ambiguity with surgical precision. In this workshop, we do not suggest. We instruct. Your progress depends entirely on your ability to process these facts with absolute focus. Listen closely. There will be no repetitions. Let us begin. The vocabulary presented now focuses on the distinction between living animals and the meat they provide. Cow. A fully grown female animal of a domesticated breed of ox, kept to produce milk or beef. For example, the farmer walked across the field to inspect the black cow. Beef. The culinary name for the meat of a cow, bull, or ox. For example, we decided to roast a large cut of beef for the Sunday dinner. Calf. A young bovine animal, particularly the offspring of a cow. For example, the newborn calf struggled to stand on its legs for the first time. Veal. The meat of a young calf, typically characterized by its pale color and tender texture. For example, the chef prepared a traditional dish using thinly sliced veal and a rich mushroom sauce. Pig. An omnivorous domesticated hoofed mammal with sparse bristly hair and a flat snout. For example, the large pig rested in the mud near the wooden barn. Pork. The culinary name for the meat of a domestic pig. For example, they slowly cooked the pork until it was tender enough to pull apart. Sheep. A domesticated ruminant mammal with a thick woolly coat. For example, a flock of sheep moved slowly across the green hillside. Mutton. The flesh of a fully grown sheep used as food. For example, the traditional stew was heavily flavored with root vegetables and hearty mutton. Lamb. A young sheep, typically under 1 year of age, or the meat derived from it. For example, the restaurant served a beautifully seasoned rack of lamb with mint sauce. Deer. A hoofed grazing or browsing animal, often with branch bony antlers on the males. For example, we observed a wild deer moving quietly through the dense forest. Venison. The meat of a deer used for culinary purposes. For example, the local butcher prepared fresh venison for a winter roast. The focus now shifts to botanical specimens, identified through precise structural and metaphorical characteristics. Oak. A large deciduous tree known for its exceptional strength and longevity, dropping acorns as if burying time capsules in the earth. For example, the ancient oak provided vast shade across the entire courtyard. Weeping willow. A deciduous tree with long flexible branches that drop down like a cascade of green tears toward the ground. For example, they sat peacefully beneath the weeping willow by the edge of the quiet lake. Rose. A woody perennial flowering plant, often acting as the crimson ambassador of affection, guarding its delicate petals with a fortress of sharp thorns. For example, she carefully pruned the red rose to encourage new growth in the spring. Sunflower. A tall plant with a massive yellow flower head that functions as a loyal golden compass, perpetually turning to track the sun. For example, the towering sunflower dominated the center of the cultivated garden. Mint. A fragrant plant with serrated leaves, delivering a sudden icy breath of fresh air to both gardens and culinary dishes. For example, he crushed a few leaves of fresh mint to infuse the cold beverage. Fern. A flowerless plant with feathery green leaves that unroll like ancient sleeping dragons awakening in the damp shade of the forest. For example, the woodland floor was completely covered by a dense carpet of green fern. The following vocabulary navigates the structural terminology of human habitation and the urban environment. House. A building for human habitation, especially one that is lived in by a family or small group of people. For example, the brick house stood at the end of a quiet lane. Detached house. An independent residential structure that does not share any outside walls with another building. For example, they purchased a detached house to ensure complete privacy from their neighbors. Block of flats. A large building that is divided into multiple separate apartments. For example, the new block of flats drastically altered the skyline of the residential area. Flat. A set of rooms for living in, usually on one floor of a larger building. For example, he rented a small flat on the third floor near the city center. Room. A part of the inside of a building that is separated from other areas by walls, a floor, and a ceiling. For example, she painted the walls of her room a pale shade of blue. Attic. A space or room just below the roof of a building, often used for storing items. For example, the forgotten documents were discovered in a dusty box in the attic. Cellar. A room below ground level in a house, typically used for storing wine or provisions. For example, the temperature in the cellar remained consistently cool throughout the summer. Pantry. A small room or large cupboard in a house where food, crockery, and provisions are kept. For example, the shelves in the pantry were fully stocked with canned goods and dry pasta. Staircase. A set of stairs and its surrounding structure. For example, the grand wooden staircase swept gracefully up to the first floor. Roof. The structure forming the upper covering of a building or vehicle. For example, heavy rain battered the slated roof during the midnight storm. Garage. A building or indoor space used for parking a motor vehicle. For example, he securely locked the car inside the garage for the night. Terrace. A paved outdoor area adjoining a house, used for dining or recreation. For example, we spent the warm evening sitting quietly on the stone terrace. Garden. A piece of ground adjoining a house, used for growing flowers, fruit, or vegetables. For example, the back garden was meticulously maintained by the previous owner. Communal areas. Shared spaces within a residential building that are accessible to all tenants. For example, the management company is strictly responsible for cleaning the communal areas. Letterbox. A slot in a door or a small box mounted outside for receiving incoming post. For example, the postman dropped the heavy parcel next to the red letterbox. Entrance. An opening, such as a door, passage, or gate, that allows access to a place. For example, the main entrance to the building requires a security code. Street. A public road in a city or town, typically with houses and buildings on one or both sides. For example, the narrow street was completely deserted by midnight. Car park. An area or building where cars or other vehicles may be left temporarily. For example, she managed to find an empty space in the large car park. Street lighting. The system of illuminating public roads and spaces at night to ensure visibility. For example, the yellow glow of the street lighting reflected on the wet pavement. We will now identify the precise terminology for domestic tools, equipment, furniture, and internal infrastructure. Plate. A flat dish, typically circular, from which food is eaten or served. For example, he carefully placed the hot plate on the wooden dining table. Knife. A cutting instrument consisting of a blade fixed into a handle. For example, she used a sharp knife to slice the crusty bread. Fork. A tool with two or more prongs used for lifting food to the mouth or holding it when cutting. For example, the silver fork clattered loudly against the ceramic bowl. Glass. A drinking vessel made of glass, typically cylindrical and without a handle. For example, he poured the cold water into a tall crystal glass. Colander. A perforated bowl used to strain off liquid from food. For example, she poured the boiled pasta into the metal colander to drain the water. Whisk. A utensil for whipping eggs or cream, consisting of wire loops joined at the handle. For example, he used a stainless steel whisk to blend the egg smoothly. Food processor. A motorized electric appliance with interchangeable blades for chopping, slicing, or pureeing food. For example, the powerful food processor reduced the vegetables to a fine paste in seconds. Coffee machine. An electrical appliance used to brew coffee automatically. For example, the automatic coffee machine ground the beans and dispensed a strong espresso. Kettle. A metal or plastic vessel with a lid, spout, and handle, used for boiling water. For example, she switched on the electric kettle to prepare a cup of morning tea. Cooker. An appliance used for cooking food, typically consisting of an oven and a heating surface. For example, the large gas cooker dominated the center of the modern kitchen. Ceramic hob. A smooth, flat cooking surface made of heat-resistant glass ceramic. For example, he wiped the cooling ceramic hob down with a damp cloth. Induction hob. A cooking surface that heats pots and pans directly using magnetic fields. For example, the water boiled almost instantly when placed on the induction hob. Hand mixer. A handheld electric device with rotating beaters used for mixing ingredients. For example, she combined the butter and sugar using an electric hand mixer. Blender. An electric machine used to puree, crush, or emulsify food and liquids. For example, he threw fresh fruit and ice into the blender to make a thick smoothie. Flannel. A small piece of toweling used for washing the face or body. For example, she soaked the flannel in warm water before wiping her face. Sponge. A piece of soft porous material used for washing or cleaning surfaces. For example, he wiped the kitchen counter down using a damp sponge. Towel. A piece of thick absorbent cloth used for drying oneself or wiping things dry. For example, he wrapped a thick towel around his waist after leaving the shower. Soap. A substance used with water for washing and cleaning, made of natural oils or synthetic compounds. For example, she washed her hands thoroughly with antibacterial soap. Broom. A cleaning implement consisting of a bundle of stiff fibers attached to a long handle, used for sweeping. For example, he used a stiff broom to sweep the dirt out of the garage. Mop. A bundle of coarse yarn or a sponge attached to a pole, used for washing floors. For example, the cleaner ran a wet mop over the tiled hallway. Vacuum cleaner. An electrical appliance that cleans surfaces by suction. For example, she used the vacuum cleaner to remove the dog hair from the carpet. Washing machine. An appliance used to wash laundry automatically. For example, he loaded the washing machine with dark clothes and added detergent. Tumble dryer. A machine that dries washed clothes by spinning them in warm air. For example, she transferred the wet laundry directly into the tumble dryer. Dishwasher. A machine for washing dishes automatically. For example, he loaded the dirty plates and glasses into the dishwasher after dinner. Cupboard. A piece of furniture or a small recess with a door, typically featuring shelves and used for storage. For example, she placed the clean cups and saucers back into the kitchen cupboard. Wardrobe. A large, tall cupboard in which clothes may be hung or stored. For example, he hung his heavy winter coat in the dark wooden wardrobe. Chest of drawers. A piece of furniture containing several horizontal drawers, typically used for storing clothes. For example, she folded her shirts neatly before placing them in the bedroom chest of drawers. Sideboard. A flat-topped piece of furniture with cupboards and drawers, used for storing crockery and glasses. For example, the dining room sideboard held all the antique silver cutlery. Dining table. A piece of furniture with a flat top and one or more legs, providing a level surface on which meals are served. For example, the entire family gathered around the large rectangular dining table for supper. Coffee table. A low table, typically placed in front of a sofa in a living room. For example, he rested his mug of hot tea on the glass coffee table. Chair. A separate seat for one person, typically with a back and four legs. For example, she pulled the wooden chair away from the desk and sat down. Armchair. A comfortable, upholstered chair with side supports for a person's arms. For example, he spent the entire evening reading a novel in the leather armchair. Sofa. A long, upholstered piece of furniture designed for several people to sit on simultaneously. For example, they bought a massive grey sofa to fill the empty space in the lounge. Office chair. A chair designed for use at a desk, often featuring wheels and adjustable height mechanisms. For example, the ergonomic office chair provided essential lower back support during long shifts. Stool. A seat without a back or arms, typically supported by 3 or 4 legs. For example, he sat on a high wooden stool near the kitchen counter. Bed. A piece of furniture used for sleep or rest, typically consisting of a frame and a mattress. For example, she collapsed onto the comfortable bed after a grueling day at work. Bed base. The structural foundation that supports the mattress of a bed, ensuring proper ventilation and firmness. For example, they replaced the broken bed base to stop the mattress from sagging in the middle. Mattress. A fabric case filled with resilient material, used as a surface for sleeping. For example, the orthopedic mattress dramatically improved the quality of his sleep. Bedsheet. A large rectangular piece of cotton or other fabric, used on a bed to cover the mattress or as a layer beneath blankets. For example, she changed the fitted bedsheet on Sunday morning. Blanket. A large piece of woolen or similar material used as a covering on a bed for warmth. For example, he pulled the thick woolen blanket up to his chin to escape the cold draft. Duvet. A soft quilt filled with down, feathers, or a synthetic alternative, used instead of an upper sheet and blankets. For example, she shook the heavy duvet to distribute the feathers evenly. Pillow. A rectangular cloth bag stuffed with soft materials, used to support the head when lying down. For example, he adjusted the firm pillow under his neck before turning off the lamp. Pillowcase. A removable cloth cover used to protect a pillow. For example, she washed the white cotton pillowcase to remove a minor stain. Lamp. A device for giving light, either one consisting of an electric bulb together with its holder and shade, or one burning gas or oil. For example, he switched on the desk lamp to read the important documents. Light bulb. A glass bulb inserted into a lamp or a ceiling socket, containing a filament that provides light when an electric current is passed through it. For example, the room plunged into darkness when the old light bulb suddenly exploded. Wall socket. An electrical device fixed to a wall, into which a plug is inserted to make a connection with the main supply. For example, she plugged her mobile phone charger into the wall socket nearest to the bed. Telephone connection. The physical or wireless link establishing a line of communication for a telephone. For example, the engineer finally repaired the broken telephone connection in the hallway. Internet connection. The link that allows a computer or device to access the global digital network. For example, the video call dropped completely because the internet connection was unstable. Satellite dish. A bowl-shaped aerial with a central receiver, designed to transmit or receive signals from communication satellites. For example, the technician secured the heavy satellite dish to the exterior brick wall. Pipe. A tube of metal, plastic, or other material used to convey water, gas, oil, or other fluid substances. For example, the plumber replaced the leaking copper pipe under the wooden floorboards. Sink. A fixed basin with a water supply and a drain, used primarily in a kitchen for washing dishes. For example, the large stainless steel sink was filled to the brim with dirty plates. Wash basin. A bowl for washing, typically attached to a wall and having taps connected to a water supply, usually found in a bathroom. For example, he shaved carefully in front of the small porcelain wash basin. Toilet. A fixed receptacle into which a person may urinate or defecate, typically consisting of a large bowl connected to a system for flushing away the waste into a sewer or septic tank. For example, the cleaning staff scrubbed the porcelain toilet with strong chemicals. Bidet. A low oval basin used for washing one's genital and anal area. For example, the modern bathroom suite included a matching toilet and bidet. Shower. A cubicle or bath in which a person stands under a spray of water to wash. For example, she took a quick, cold shower to wake up before her morning shift. Bath. A large container for water, used for immersing and washing the body. For example, he relaxed for an hour in a hot bath infused with aromatic salts. Before we conclude, let us assess our current trajectory. The author has noted a slight but definitive increase in audio streams and YouTube metrics. This progression is acknowledged with satisfaction. It is not for personal validation, but because it indicates you, the listeners, are recognizing the strict utility of this resource. Should this positive reception continue, the infrastructure will expand to include a dedicated website and unrestricted access to complimentary transcripts. If you have extracted value from this content, you are instructed to make it known to others. For those requiring a severe degree of difficulty, the matrix phase is operational. It is designed for listeners willing to tackle hard science and uncompromising, advanced English. Furthermore, you are advised to consult the archive. Older episodes contain critical data and interesting notions that will rectify any pre-existing gaps in your linguistic foundation. A final administrative update. The comment section on YouTube is now active. You are expected to conduct yourselves with dignity and respect when leaving a remark. Any deviation from this standard will not be tolerated. Keep boosting your English. Bye for now.
Ready to boost